Welcome to Web3 and Whiskey, a podcast about how the decentralized internet will change our lives. In each episode, we react to a future when users and communities have all of the power and when digital lives could be as vibrant as real life. And we drink whiskey while doing it. I'm your host, Gary Liu, and as always, I'm joined by Suresh Balaji, founder of the Web3 Marketing Association, and Malcolm Ong, a product leader and serial entrepreneur. And as always, we also have our producer, Disco Wolf, with us, or as we call him, D-Dubs. He's here to fact check us and judge our opinions. If D-Dubs likes what we say, you will hear. If he dislikes our opinion, you will hear. Quick disclaimer. We don't show projects in this podcast, so consider any excitement that you hear from us to be personal opinion, and our opinion should never, ever be taken as investment advice of any kind. How you guys doing, gentlemen? Suresh, I see you're on the road again, huh?
I am in sunny Singapore. It's a Saturday afternoon, and I have the only whiskey I could find in the minibar. I'm ready to go.
And what is that only whiskey you can find in the minibar? There's really only three choices, right, when you get to the minibar?
That's exactly it. There are two choices, and this one is number 7, Jack Daniels.
Number 7.
Classic.
Yeah, where's the Coke that goes with it?
I know. Yeah, there is Coke, but I don't like mixing anything with my whiskey. So, as you know, and I'm loving it.
Excellent. Malcolm, what about you? What are you drinking today?
Today, I'm bringing back my go-to Balvenie 16. So this is one that I just generally like a lot. It's tends to be pretty smooth. So if you recall, this is a Space Side. It's a 40% ABV. And it's a triple cask. So this one's a triple cask. So it combines actually, it's matured in 3 different casks. First fill bourbon, refill bourbon, and sherry. So I do get a little bit of spice and vanilla, a little bit of pear and pepper in there. Just generally smooth. I think that's why I like it.
Thank you for sharing the Balvenie. No IB for me today, but I'm going to bring back, I'm going to bring a Cavalon. I'm bringing a Cavalon, which is something that Malcolm has already shared before. This is a different one than what Malcolm shared. This is also part of their Solist collection, but it's what they call the Manzanilla. It is a heavily sherry cask. You guys by now know that I really love sherry casks, and Cavalon does sherry just as well as, if not better than, pretty much any distillery out there. And this one is absolutely, right on the nose. You can smell that sweetness. And when you sip it, it honestly tastes like a Black Forest cake to me.
Wow!
Because it's just so much brown sugar to it, and then the vanilla from the oak cask. Manzanilla. I looked this up because I didn't know what that word meant. I think it means chamomile in Spanish because it is a Spanish sherry cask. And I can't really taste any tea or smell any tea in this.
You know, Cavalon are the example of a really good product doesn't need great advertising. So if you have ever seen any Cavalon ads, they are so shite, but the whiskey is phenomenal.
You
just go, wow.
Yeah, it's a young distillery. It's only about 15 years old in Taiwan. They set it up just like a traditional Scottish distillery with the original Scottish stills. But because Taiwan has such high humidity, much higher than the Highlands of Scotland, the angel share, the amount of whiskey that evaporates from the bottle every single year is about 5 times that you would find in Scotland. Because of that, the whiskeys age much quicker, which means generally speaking, Cavalons that are aged about 3 years can really taste like something that's aged 13, 14, 15 years in Scotland. And they're precisely made, in the water and the part of Taiwan where the Cavalon distillery is just so pure. That's why they taste so good.
But still no excuse for bad advertising, mate.
Hey, you gotta move to Taiwan and help them out.
This is it.
NFT
in a parallel universe.
NFT community for Cavalon. I'm in. We'll go take a trip soon.
That's it.
Well, cheers, gentlemen. Thank you for sharing your whiskeys, and here's to a great conversation this afternoon.
Cheers.
Speaking of conversation, our main topic today, what you need to know about NFT rights. Now, we've touched on this before, but today we're going to come back to it, and we're going to dig deep into all the rights, or actually the rights that don't come with NFTs. But before we get to the main topic, we are going to have some reactions to the news. D-Dubs, what do you have for us this week?
As usual, I have 5 news items for you this week. First, Starbucks introduces Web3-based program Starbucks Odyssey, giving members the ability to earn and buy NFTs. Suresh.
I haven't been more excited about a project launch than this one, right? I recently posted on LinkedIn that this is something I wish I had done. Having a mainstream brand like Starbucks dive into this is going to hugely boost Web3 adoption, right? Whether they get it right or wrong, I think it's just spreading the word, and more people jumping into it is way better. The really exciting thing from a structural perspective is the opportunity for Starbucks to take fiat off their balance sheet, right? Millions and millions of dollars of fiat sitting on their balance sheet. Every reward point is a liability for them because this can be drawn by the customer at any point. By creating their own tokens, they've essentially created a completely off-balance sheet economy. So, from an industry perspective, for enterprise leaders, this is a great case study to look at in terms of creating value out of their community. The second piece that excites me about it is network effects, right? Loyalty programs are always bilateral. It's the big firm, big brand to the one user. But is this going to unlock sort of the proper network effects? Is it one to many and then many to many? And what opportunities that creates will be amazing. And lastly, Starbucks becomes Starbucks. Gary, you called it. You
right.
named it Starbucks with a BUX. And if it's a token that can be sold, traded, staked, wow, amazing, right? I mean, this is the start of a huge journey for Starbucks and completely rewiring their rewards program. So super excited.
Yeah, thanks for those of our listeners that have been with us in the beginning. We first heard about this in one of our first episodes. So it's exciting that they're finally announcing it and some of the plans at least, right? Remember, Starbucks, this is interesting for them because they have 27.4 million rewards active members already through a 90-day period. And what's more interesting is that their rewards program actually accounts for over 50% of sales. So this is a huge deal, not only because of Starbucks brand name and global, footprint already, but the fact that this is actually a big piece. The rewards loyalty program is already a big piece of their business. So it tells me that they're actually fully committed and they have really, really strong conviction. This is not just a small kind of experiment for them. So, I think they really see themselves as this third, place between home and office, right, for community connection. So it's interesting that they're realizing that maybe the Web3 and the metaverse can be an extension to that third place in a way. I want to hear more about what's really going to be the details about this. One thing though that I like with their experience that they're calling Odyssey is that they're designing to be very accessible for a mainstream audience, right? Number one, it's an extension to their current program. Number two, they're not calling it NFTs, they're calling it stamps. And people are going to go through journeys or quests. And you don't really need crypto. You can use it, your credit card, to purchase these outright. And so no, onboarding to crypto wallets necessary, no knowledge of gas fees necessary. Our mom and dad should be able to use this. And so that's what I actually think. And I like the way that they've done that. So huge win to bring mainstream users into Web3 here.
Suresh, one point that you made, I might have to disagree with. You said that this allows Starbucks to take millions of dollars from their existing rewards program off of their balance sheet. I think maybe initially it does, but inevitably these rewards, whether it's the stamps or NFTs that are tradable or their tokens, if they do release an ecosystem token, they will be considered liquid assets. They will have an open market value. And so they'll be back on the balance sheet, maybe with a little bit more volatility than US dollars. So it's still to be seen whether or not this is good for the P&L and good for budgeting. But at the very least, in one way, they're creating their own economy. But I think the most interesting thing about all this is actually what Malcolm brought up, which is that Starbucks is staying away from blockchain and Web3 language. So the members are being introduced to virtual assets without necessarily knowing that these are virtual assets. I think Web3 will scale in a more accelerated way if there are more of these Trojan horse experiments and products that look like Web2 experiences, look like traditional rewards programs, and then bring people, or membership programs, and then bring people into the Web3 world. I actually do think that in the back end, my guess is Starbucks is creating custodial wallets for each of these individuals. that eventually will be able to hold other crypto assets. That's great. Also, maybe you get 30 million more crypto wallets like that overnight. And then let's see when these stamps become tradable. And they've mentioned in their press release that these stamps will be tradable on an open marketplace that Starbucks effectively controls. This will be a first big test to see whether or not open trading of loyalty rewards and assets is good or bad for a brand. Most of the time for loyalty programs, the issuers of these loyalty rewards don't want them to be tradable because they want their rewards to go to people who've already spent time, money, or just have a lot of interaction with the brand itself. Now that they're tradable, you could have first timers coming in and buying up a bunch of rewards and taking advantage of them. Is that good or bad for a rewards program? We'll see.
But here's the thing, Gary. If you're an enterprise leader, who I'm guessing our listeners are, if you're a CMO, you're used to RFPing with agencies, with media companies, etc. It's the first time Starbucks CMO probably has had to RFP a layer 1 or a layer 2. Or did they RFP? How did they go about it? Why did they choose Polygon? How do you create the judging criteria? All of that is unknown, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a completely big leap into where no CMO has gone before. And this is probably where, you need good partners, you need sounding boards, you need to come and listen to podcasts like this and to really learn before you sign up hey, let me choose Polygon over Solana. How did they do it?
This is just an associated side note, but Starbucks has always kept their major technology initiatives very close to their executive team, but yet slightly separate. Before this, well, actually, this program, Odyssey, is run by a new a blockchain company called Forum 3 that was founded by Starbucks' former chief digital officer. So it's still very much kind of like a related party transaction to some degree. And then previously, one of the last major technological experiments that Starbucks did was closing the loop using music in their stores. And there was a company called Play Network, which they partnered with. This was maybe 15 years ago, and maybe 10 years ago. And then the actual CEO of Play Network became part of the executive team at Starbucks. So, Starbucks is so large that any technology company that gets within its orbit eventually has only Starbucks as a client. You really don't have any capacity to go work with anyone else. That's a smart play. So from an RP perspective, I'm pretty sure that it was Forum 3 that made the decision to go with Polygon. Of course, I'm sure Howard Schultz and his executive team going to sign off on it. But you are right. Big brands working directly with layer ones ought to change the accountability of some of these, community-owned projects too in the future.
Well, that was quite the odyssey, fellas. We have 4 more items to get through today. Number 2, Paramount Pictures files 2 trademarks for Mean Girls NFTs. Malcolm.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is just for Mean Girls specifically or why they picked that, but interesting because it gives Paramount the ability to, effectively create digital merch here. Digital merch as NFTs can be collected and traded. So not surprised. I expect, Paramount and other production houses to almost just do this with pretty much every single valuable IP that they have.
I think Mean Girls makes sense. It is a great movie. I have no problem admitting that. Anything Rachel McAdams is in, great movie, except for The Notebook, by the way. But Mean Girls has generated lots of memes, lots of GIFs. So many of the reactions that you see in GIF form on chat are from Mean Girls, and of course Halloween costumes. Even though the movie is it's already considered old, it's a sort of a cult classic already at this point. Still lots of Halloween costumes every single year for the Mean Girls plastic gang. So I think that as a Web3 IP, this makes a lot of sense, and I think we're going to see more and more of this. We're in a trademark land grab or protection phase right now. Ford just recently trademarked the most popular car brands in the metaverse. Who knows whether or not they have something planned, or maybe they're just protecting those trademarks because there are already so many car racing games that are being built as play-to-earn games. So we'll see more and more of this.
I'm not sure what this trademark really even means, right? I mean, if someone created memes with Mean Girls, and they become viral, how on earth can Paramount track, police, protect their trademark? So even in Web 1 and Web 2, digital trademarks are in quite a nascent space. So you're right. I think trademark land grab is what it is.
Okay, number 3. The Ethereum merge is complete. Gary.
Well, this is a big deal, and it's not just a big deal for people that are already in the blockchain world. This is the first major step that Ethereum must take to become, down the road, not yet, but down the road, relevant beyond a first mover ecosystem, right? This merge, what it's done, it's made a fundamental change, right, to the network that is going to address a lot of the throughput and transactional cost issues that have held Ethereum back from scaling beyond its current, primary use cases. And I know for insiders, I'm gonna sound absolutely ridiculous because people are gonna scream that Ethereum has already infinite kinds of use cases and applications, but not at scale, right? We've talked about this before in our podcast, and whenever I talk to other enterprise leaders about experimenting in Web3 and especially about Ethereum, those same questions come up. Oh, we know the transactional costs are really high. We know it's bad for the environment. We know the throughput is not there. It's not what Visa is. So why would I build on it? And the merge is the first step to try and solve for those things. Speaking of energy, by the way, the energy savings of the move from a proof of work to proof of stake over the next 12 months for Ethereum, energy savings equals the overall energy use of the entire country of Chile in the next year. So it's quite significant.
Gary, but I think there's a big misconception that this creates network capacity. Apparently, that's not the case. And therefore, gas prices are not going to go down. Yes, energy is going down. I'm not sure if, proof of stake really means that more brands and more programs and more projects will come on Ethereum. Not sure yet. I expected my ETH prices to go up and go through the roof, and given all the hype around the merge, and ETH really dropped by 7% yesterday, right? I was like, oh, what the hell happened here? And the most interesting thing for me was that I read about was someone minted the last proof of work on the last block, which was minted for 31.5 ETH, and someone did the post merge proof of stake chain. The first NFT was minted for 36 ETH. I mean, that's just opportunistic. That was interesting. The last piece around this is, I wonder what happens to layer twos like Polygon, who are on top of Ethereum, and they become even more energy efficient given that they are doing sort of bulk hashing of some sorts. So fascinating times.
Actually, this you're right. There's a misconception that this will affect gas fees and et cetera. But it's because I think the merge is just the first step. Right? It's a prerequisite for a lot of other things that they're going to be doing in the future. And this is the first step towards that move. And so I do feel, and I do agree with Gary, that this is a major step, and the transition and migration to proof of stake will be setting the groundwork for Ethereum to become, have the possibility to become very mainstream and increase the usage. So I do think this is a big deal. I think this is a prerequisite for them to get there. And just as a reminder for people, right? The merge is about migrating from proof of work to proof of stake. You mentioned Polygon, Suresh. Polygon's already kind of a layer 2 that provides a lot of these benefits. It will just simply help, right? Actually, a lot of the changes in terms of what happens to Polygon, et cetera, not much change, except whatever makes Ethereum better will make the layer 2s better. So this is welcomed by the Polygon community. And energy is just one of those pieces. In fact, they estimated that it was 99.95% energy savings. After the merge, it was actually a little bit more than that. I think it was something along 99.998 or something, something close to 100% in a sense. But this is definitely a big deal here. So for most users, this upgrade doesn't require any action. It's should be seamless. Unless you're a miner, it doesn't really affect you. But it's interesting that there are miners out there that are trying to preserve, the proof of work chain. They actually did a rival offshoot called ETH POW, proof of work, and they wanted to preserve this. But funny enough, they didn't really have a successful fork and launch. It actually had some technical issues during their launch. So yeah, I think I'm excited about this.
Number 4, White House releases its first ever comprehensive framework for responsible development of digital assets. Suresh.
I'm excited by this. This framework is seminal in the development and adoption of digital assets, in my view, right? And as a CMO, I I'm all about customer protection and rights, which means I'm totally pro-regulation. And this is a big step in the direction, because essentially I was reading through the framework, and what they've done is they've given a green light to Treasury, SEC, CFTC, and all of these bodies to coordinate and share customer complaints, issues, opportunities, etc. This is seminal. This is big piece. This will come in the form of some sort of regulatory guidance for all the firms in this space. So the pendulum essentially is moving away from caveat emptor, where buyer beware, to hey, there is someone to take care of your assets, someone to protect the decisions that you make in this space. I think, and this is huge.
Yeah, I think this is interesting. The administration is, wants to prioritize speeding up payments, both domestic and international. I'm just glad that they finally see that digital assets and this technology can offer significant opportunities. So this being a first step towards maybe that, regulation and towards understanding more. I know we're super, super early, and there's probably still a long ways to go, but I'm optimistic that maybe this means that the whole concept of CBDCs inches closer to reality here.
I'm also pro-regulation. Maybe not as much as Suresh is, but I'm definitely not anti-regulation. But I'm reading through this, and my first reaction is, it's not as optimistic as the two of you guys. It reads to me like, once again, the executive office sees this only as risk and not as opportunity. It starts with the premise that there was a crash and therefore people need to be protected. And so I think this is only going to be more investigation, more regulation, more punitive actions. I mean, look at the language of this quote unquote fact sheet, right? The SEC and the CFTC are going to be empowered to aggressively pursue investigation and enforcement actions. That's how they start, right? The CFPB and the FTC to redouble their efforts to monitor consumer complaints and enforce against unfair, deceptive, abuse of privacy. That's how it starts. It's not about innovation. It's not about encouraging people to take a look at virtual assets and figure out how this could better society. It's starting at a point this early on, by the way, in our innovation cycle, starting from investigation and regulation. And then where it does talk about innovation, now it's government agency-led innovation. When has that worked in the United States since NASA? It hasn't. Certainly not in the age of Web 1 or Web 2. Government agency-led anything has failed. And so in this case, I think that if innovation has to be led by government agencies, whereas everything else about that document is about regulation and investigation, I don't see this as a good signal for the marketplace.
But Gary, this is just industrial policy, right? This is the foundational policy on which everything can be built.
Not this early, Suresh.
No property rights.
This is way too early at this point, right? This is going to stunt innovation as opposed to encourage it. At this point, it's just too early. The products aren't even, they haven't even been invented.
Well, let's agree to disagree, right? I think this is like property rights in a country where, you have land rights, and if those land rights don't exist, and then nobody wants to build a building or lease it out or any of that.
That's
stuff,
not
right?
the
So
story. That's not the story of the United States, period. Policy. In the United States, that's not the story of it, right? The United States has developed over time in that gray area where there's opportunity to actually innovate and create and invent. And then when there is a scaled product and when there are actually scaled consumers in the space, then of course government should come up with regulation for scaled consumer protection. And I just think that right now, it is way too early. And if this is actually enforced, I actually think the United States is in deep trouble.
Well, let's just agree to disagree, and cheers to that.
Gents, we'll have a debate episode later on. Final item, Sorare takes on NBA Top Shot with Ethereum NFT-based fantasy NBA game. Malcolm.
Yeah, so Sorare is a startup that's already valued at $4.3 billion. They have some successful projects already, with one in soccer and one in baseball with the MLB. So this time they're partnering with the NBA to come out with this fantasy project. Of course, they're following the footsteps a little bit of the NBA Top Shots project. So, I think this, it's just great to see more projects come out for sports, and being able to get more sports fans, I think, into the Web3 world.
Yeah, this is not a direct competitor to Top Shot for anyone who thinks that. This is a fantasy game. It's a very, very different product than what Top Shot is. Top Shot is collectibles, these kind of moments and highlights. In the Sorare world, you buy and collect players, right? And you form a lineup and you receive rewards based on your team's fantasy performance. I think Sorare is a brilliant platform. I think I don't know if they're worth $4 billion, but it doesn't surprise me at all that they are worth a lot of money. Because what they've created and invented is really a great use case for NFTs. Effectively, these are digital assets that produce income, which are then still tradable. It's just a great execution of NFTs. And the NBA is doing a great job with experimentation. They have Top Shot, which is relatively early. They launched the association last year during the last playoffs. Now Sorare. Of course, NFT players and owners have been talking about Web3 over the course of the last few years. There was an NBA player named Spencer Dinwiddie who wanted to actually turn his contract into tokenized assets and allow fans to participate in that contract. I don't think the NBA ended up letting that happen. And then you have owners like Mark Cuban and Joe Tsai who have invested a lot in Web3 and really believe in that future. So all of this makes sense, especially when you consider that basketball players are kind of like the tip of the spear for social culture in the United States right now, whether it's fashion or music. And the fact that they are talking about Web3 also shows you sort of the standing of Web3. People really do believe that decentralized community activity is going to be next generation culture. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who was the player who signed up to receive all his payments in crypto during the crypto boom? Is he slapping himself right now? Did he change his contract? I don't know what happened there.
There was a few of those players, right?
Yeah, but I think that you're primarily referring to Spencer Dinwiddie. He wanted to be paid in crypto. He also wanted to take his contract and tokenize it, effectively make it into securities, and then pay out any bonuses and whatnot to people who kind of bet on his career. That never ended up happening. The NBA didn't allow it, and he was on the Brooklyn Nets at that point with Joe as the owner. But I do know that there were very real conversations about it, and I think inevitably at some point in the next couple of years, somebody's going to actually do that with their contract.
And it's also fascinating because sports fans are some of the those communities are the most ardent communities, right? They're deep into it. They're totally connected. Opportunities for merchandise, opportunities for events, IRL events, virtual events. There is just so much that one can do with the right kind of brand around it and with the right kind of structure around it. Yeah, all I can say is there's more opportunity here. This is just early days, right?
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the reactions to the news, and thank you, D-Dubs, for sharing these topics again. Let's jump to our main topic of conversation. By the way, I'm already very quickly becoming the anti-regulation guy on this podcast, which is just not true. I'm not anti-regulation. I feel like I have to caveat again. It's just that enforcement activities that stop people from innovating, that worries me. Anyway, whole nother topic of conversation for maybe a main discussion at some point. But today's main discussion: what you need to know about NFT rights. NFTs, as we've discussed in the past, are the primary building blocks of Web3 because what they do is they empower digital ownership and asset value. So, rights are fundamentally important to your understanding of NFTs and to the NFT's value to the scale and creation of Web3. So the big question that I'm sure all of us have been asked in the past: when I buy an NFT, what do I actually own? A couple of episodes ago, we did an entire big myths of NFT, demystifying NFTs, and we addressed this rights issue. And it was interesting enough, we decided to bring it back as the main topic to go deeper into this topic. Okay. In that episode, a couple of weeks back, we actually broke down the parts of an NFT. And most importantly, we all agreed that the NFT is actually a certificate of authenticity that points to an underlying asset, two different things. Certificate of authenticity, and then an underlying asset. And usually what we do is we take these two things, kind of mush them together, and we say this togetherness, this thing, is the NFT. Fine. You know what? I'm okay with that. But in reality, the NFT proves that you have ownership of that underlying asset. However, the IP rights of that underlying asset are a totally different matter. So an example that I like to give is this. You go to Disneyland, and you can buy a Mickey Mouse stuffed animal, and you own that Mickey Mouse stuffed animal. but you don't own the rights to Mickey Mouse, right? So that's pretty much the same thing, generally speaking, as an NFT. You buy the NFT, you own the underlying asset, but whatever creative and commercialization rights come with that IP, that is a separate issue. So what are the IP rights that NFT owners own today? There are 4 categories of existing rights that I want to very, very quickly go through so we're all on the same page. And then there's a 5th category that has just been, I guess it's announced, but somebody has posited that this is a new, not posited, they have released a new type of NFT license, but it has yet to be implemented, so we actually don't know what the results are. So let's quickly go through these categories. The first category is no commercial rights at all. It's like buying that Mickey Mouse stuffed animal. This is also the same as default, as traditional art sales. This is the default commercial rights that come with traditional art sales. You go to an art auction, Art Basel here, and in Hong Kong, and you go to an auction and you buy a Picasso. What you get is you get that physical Picasso painting for personal display, and that's about it, right? That painting follows the rules of art and creative works and how they will eventually land in public domain. The actual IP rights of that picture still belong to Picasso's estate. In fact, for Picasso, it still belongs to the Picasso estate for, I think, another 45 some years. For most things that have been created and from the 1980s onwards, the IP rights are retained by the creator or the creator's estate until 70 years after the creator's death. This is the same with general default NFT rights. Whoever created the actual piece of art or who owns the original IP rights will retain them until further notice, until they pass into public domain. So owners never own commercial rights. That is the default IP rights of an NFT. That's category number 1. Category number 2, limited commercial rights. So a very famous early NFT collection called CryptoKitties on that Dapper Labs released, I think 2017, used an NFT license that you can find on nftlicense.org. And that license is a limited commercial use license. There are others like it, which restricts CryptoKitties owners to commercialization up to $100,000 per year. And they can only commercialize the images that they own in certain ways. They can't use it to endorse other products, as an example. So that's limited commercial rights. Not very popular these days. The third category of IP rights are full commercial rights. Famously, Bored Apes. Bored Ape Yacht Club owners can commercialize the apes that they own without any limit. They can put them on merchandise. They can create derivative works with those apes. Those apes can star in movies, can endorse restaurants, right? Can actually open their own restaurants. And Bored Apes, because of that, have become incredibly valuable, not just because of the access to the community, not just because of their scarcity, but also because of their rights. In fact, there are Bored Apes that have been actual Bored Apes. The actual cartoons themselves have been signed to talent contracts, right? We have Snoop Dogg and Eminem with their Bored Apes acting in their newest music video. And those Bored Apes have actually shown up on the red carpet along with, their owners. So they're treated as completely separate, like living creatures, entities. However, one thing to note is that these full commercial rights are still just a license from the creator. The fourth category, no rights reserved. CC0, Creative Commons Zero Rights category, which means anyone can do anything, anytime, anywhere, regardless of ownership. Okay. CC0 means that the creators of Moonbirds, which is the Proof Collective, or the company behind Proof, have said, yes, we created these images, and you as an owner own these images, but anyone has the rights to do whatever they want with them. One of the first NFT collections that used CC0 rights was a collection called MFers, and it was done as a test to see whether or not more derivative works means that the asset becomes more famous, therefore meaning the asset has more value. For MFers, it worked for a little bit, and then it stopped working. So let's see what happens to Moonbirds, especially because Moonbirds actually changed full commercial rights to no rights reserved after sale, which, by the way, proves that creators can actually change the IP rights licenses kind of whenever they want. The final category, and this is the one that is brand new, is the Can't Be Evil licenses that Andreessen Horowitz have now published and recorded onto the blockchain. These rights have explicit language for virtual assets. They are rights that are created specifically for NFTs. And one type of right available among this group is really shared commercial rights between creators and owners. That's really interesting to me, where owners have full commercialization rights, but the original creators also retain those full commercialization rights. No major NFT collection has adopted these can't be evil rights yet from A16Z. So we'll have to see in the future how that plays out.
Here's the question, Gary. So if the creator holds the key to calling on a CC0 back to becoming a limited rights only. So let's say Proof Collective now have said, go ahead, it's in the public domain. It's like Picasso after 17 years. Anybody can do anything you want with it. And let's say that Malcolm sets up a restaurant, picks up any moonbird, and creates merchandise out of it. One fine day, Proof say, sorry, folks, we are going back on our word. And what happens then? There seems to be some sort of there is no protection for anyone who is using anything on the public domain because someone holds the key and they can switch on, switch off anytime. How does that work?
Can they do that? Go back and forth?
Well, they can definitely change it, but my guess is, and we've made this point before, actually, Suresh, you've made this point before, there isn't precedent law to this yet, and it will be eventually really interesting when these cases go to court. But I imagine that any court will, if, for instance, Proof decides they make it CC0 and then they try and pull that back, I imagine that any court would say, nope, you can't do that. You have made it effectively public domain and you can't revert that.
Yeah, this is where, going back to your point around, does the nation state and therefore the state understand the implications of CC0, can be evil, as a license? Is there legal around this? Do lawyers understand it? Will the jury understand it? Will judges understand it? Where does jurisdiction come in? There's no one knows, right? It's just super, super duper early days. But alongside this, so if I think of the moonbirds themselves, I'm guessing that they've said that Proof Collective have said the images are CC0, but as a holder, the utility that you have, that could probably become part of a utility patent, right? There are multiple kinds of patents. Utility patent is the number one form of patent, if I remember right. And if there is there a way that patents change therefore? And how does patent law apply alongside copyright law? And given that all of this is in the digital space, how do those two things come together? I don't know, right?
Okay, so I think we'll probably need some clarification because I'm a little bit confused about what you mean by utility patents. I think one first clarification is that, as you rightly point out, the value of the NFT is not just about the IP rights that it comes with. The actual asset itself, there are other reasons, there are other things from which it derives its value. Scarcity being one, supply and demand, utility being a big other, right? A NFT membership that unlocks community and access can be valuable just by itself, even if it doesn't come with IP rights. So, what do you mean by utility patent?
So patents come, I think there are three types of patents. There is a utility patent, there is a design patent, and there's something called a plant patent, which is about biology and something else. But utility patents are the biggest form of patents in the US. Most of the stuff that people patent are utility patents, saying that, hey, this invention that I've created is of some sort of utility for someone, and therefore I own rights to it. So if Proof Collective have created some utility on, then now there are two angles to it, right? One is copyright of the image itself, but the image means nothing now because it's in the public domain. But for a holder, the utility is crucial, and that probably what comes out of that invention of the way that they've structured something, the way that they've structured, utility of, and the process that sit behind, managing the community, creating value out of it. All of that is probably what's the added value of that group of people. Now, how will that play a role? How will that play a role in a DAO scenario? Who owns that? If they give away the CC0 rights to the image, automatically Does the patent also go away? We don't know yet. I can't get my head around it yet.
I think the word utility here is a little bit overloaded, right? When we're talking about utility patent, it's a little bit different than utilities for an NFT project. But that said, I think to answer your question, my guess is that it would, if an NFT project or proof came up with a patent and were issued a utility patent, it would be tied to the project itself rather than perhaps individual NFTs, which I think. And so therefore, it would ride with, I think, the overall value of the whole project rather than the individuals that, each specific individual NFT that owns XYZ or has access or rights to XYZ. That would be my guess. But
by the way, Suresh, you're making me pronounce the word patent in two different ways now. I'm going to be hopping back and forth between patent and patent. Actually, you do bring up an interesting point. What if somebody decides to try and patent a type of NFT, like NFTs that unlock membership? Today, anyone can create one of those. We've created them at Artifact Labs. All of us belong to NFT communities where our NFTs actually unlock benefits. That I don't think anyone has tried to patent. If it were to be patented, can you?
I don't know if it's significant enough of a quote unquote invention, but I mean, I could foresee something like that. If significant enough, then yes, of course. But so far,
it goes completely against Web3 philosophy, right, and ideology. But if it's seen as a technological key that unlocks a certain type of benefit, I don't know. We should probably bring a patent lawyer onto the show to ask these tough questions.
Yeah. But this is the thing. Talking about Web3 philosophy. When Proof Collective, or at least the founder of Proof Collective, decided to change the rights without checking in with the holders, that's not decentralization. That's not Web3 philosophy. So I don't know what everyone's smoking about. This sort of decentralized Web3. It's hugely centralized. Even this is case in point.
Don't burst people's bubbles, Suresh.
I got a ding.
Yes. But Malcolm, again, we brought this up before because you are part of the Moonbirds community, and I know that you've told us in the past it still needs to be teased out what the community is really thinks about this. It's still only a couple weeks old. Was there any communication before Moonbirds announced that they were going to shift over to CC0?
No, it was quite a surprise. And so I think that's why there's so much backlash from the community that it was something that was unexpected. And then something that the community felt came from the team rather than from the community. So I think that was the reason for the backlash.
You bought into Moonbirds when they had full commercial rights, right? If you hadn't, and then they switched to CC0, would that have changed your decision on joining that community?
Not for me personally. I joined the community primarily because of actually the Proof team themselves, right? And my confidence in them being able to create something out of this and their other projects as well. So I'm actually backing more about, their team. And then of course, the ability to be part of the community that they've been able to, collect and attract. So for me, rights was not part of the equation. But even if it was part of the equation, I actually think, although I may not agree with the way that they did it, and maybe they should have maybe been more transparent or communicated better. And so they certainly could have handled this better. But I actually think this might be a good thing because, looking at examples, again, we're early, but I actually think the MFers was a very interesting example, even though maybe at the end of the day, it wasn't wildly successful, but I actually think that's a great example. And so my perspective on this is that if I own something and I'm part of a community something, and you actually allow others out there to create derivative works that will potentially increase the value of that underlying, asset, go ahead, right? That's my perspective on it. So I actually am intrigued by this. I want to see more derivative works out there. And so I actually want to see more projects under CC0 allowing this. And overall, I personally think it's a good thing. So I didn't really have too much of a negative reaction to it.
I think the beauty of CC0 is about creating adoption, right? If projects, ultimately it boils down to what projects want. if projects want more people to adopt, if you want more people to be wearing Moonbirds shirts, t-shirts, having backgrounds, profile pictures, without worrying about getting wrapped on the knuckles, then you go CC0. If scale is the intent, then CC0 makes sense. If creating value and creating monetary value out of your brand is the intent, then you got to control it and manage it to a place where there is scarcity, and then one can boost value.
But it's not only scarcity that creates value, right? And so I think, imagine a case where some derivative gets created and it actually becomes wildly popular or successful, and potentially brings more awareness about Moonbirds, more attention to Moonbirds, and additional opportunities, and opens doors for that. Then I actually think that people maybe would look back and say, hey, actually the move to CC0 was great because it made the project a lot better.
Yeah.
So I don't think scarcity is just the thing. And yes, scale is not only the thing, it is about value as well, but it can go both ways. It can be, it can create success and it can increase value, but it also can go the other way, where if someone messes up, what if someone does create some derivative, or someone does use the brand in some way that actually creates an extremely negative reaction to the mainstream market? Then it hurts the brand, right?
That's a big risk. You're right.
We brought up MFers a couple of times. I want to make sure that our listeners understand what it is. It's a NFT collection that is based off of just a stick figure image that has been floating around the internet for a very long time. It's a stick figure side profile of some person at their computer. And the entire idea of MFers was made by a parody account named Sartoshi. The entire idea was to create this no rights reserved Creative Commons Zero NFT collection that people can then turn into any number of comics, right? The goal was to get derivative works and use these stick figures, put them in funny, weird situations, in community projects together and whatnot. And that's why it was so successful. I think MFers would have been, it's ugly art. So MFers would not have been interesting at all without CC0, right? If it had any other type of rights, because there was no community, there was no roadmap. It was just about derivative works. So putting out there with these types of rights with no rights reserved makes sense. But these rights don't make sense for every collection. And I think that what I like about the way the NFT world is evolving, it is the fact that there are many different types of rights that you can now attach. Right? Even 12 months ago, it really was just the default rights. No one really cared about the limited commercial use rights. And so there was not a lot of optionality. I spent a lot of time as part of Artifact Labs talking to IP owners. That's the point of the company, is to help people with historical IP kind of represent them on the blockchain and then create new engagement and community models, as well as potentially new business models using that IP. And of course, the most important thing to our partners are rights. They don't want to, especially museums and newspapers and cultural institutions, they don't want to just arbitrarily give up, or I shouldn't say arbitrarily, perpetually give up the rights to their collections. And that is the concept that they have in their head is, if I sell anything online, the rights are therefore gone. The digital rights are therefore no longer mine. And that has been the myth that we've really had to bust in our conversations with potential partners. Having multiple different kinds of rights means that each of these projects, each of these institutions, with their different needs and requirements and their different goals, they can have a different approach to NFT communities and NFT collections. So I think that is a good development. Now, Malcolm, we've talked about this in the past. I would love to get your point of view. Where else do you think the kind of rights ecosystem or the rights options in the NFT world needs to go for Web3 to scale? Actually, let me rephrase that. That was a terribly framed question. What evolution needs to happen to NFT rights for Web3 to truly scale to the point where corporations, big companies with lots of IP, feel like they are willing to enter into this world, and individual creators feel like they have enough control to participate in NFT-driven Web3 ecosystem?
Yeah, I think first to echo that we are still very early, and the whole NFT technology has introduced, new paradigms of ownership and whatnot. And so, we're still very early. There's still a path forward to figure out how this really works. But in my mind, number one, the fact that we're even talking about this right now, and the fact that we are coming up with some options is a good next step. Because like you said before, NFT project, we're not really using licenses. And if they wanted to, if these projects wanted to, they're surely very expensive to do so. So I think step one is standardization, right? Let's, as an industry, align on a bunch of different types of rights that are out there and standardize that such that individual products themselves don't have to think about it, don't have to come up with about it. And on the community side and on the buyer side, most people don't have to learn or even read, hey, this specific project has, this detailed type of right that is not standard and no one else has really seen. So I think step one is standardization. Step two is transparency, right? So making sure that people understand that here are the options, here are the standards that are out there. And so it's clear and there's no more ambiguity of what those rights are. And then I think finally, number three is the flexibility and the optionality of the different rights that we come up with. So can we come up with a set of standard rights that the industry sort of aligns on and accepts as a standard and starts to adopt, that actually gives, therefore, the projects and the owners and the community at large, flexibility, optionality, and choice. So it's enough of a mix to, sort of cover, I think, the different use cases there. And that's actually why I think it's great that A16Z came up with that Can't Be Evil proposal, right? We touched upon this last time. And in fact, the way that they've done it, they've tried to cover multiple different aspects from, copy, display, distribute, like in the t-shirt, to being able to create derivatives, so modifying and adapting, to, hey, if I want to sub-license this, can I? They even went as far as this one thing that is interesting: hate speech revocation, right? So you cannot use an NFT in any way that's actually unlawful, harassing, etc. So they've even baked that in. So it's interesting that we're starting to think about those options. So let's put that all on the table. Let's have the smartest minds in the industry discuss, debate, and align on that. And I think if we can come up with the first version of some standards and sort of see if projects will test it and sort of see if projects will adopt it, that's, I think, what we need for this to really work at scale for Web3.
Suresh, pro-regulation Suresh, when should government step in to regulate rights? Governments regulate rights today, right? And right now, these are all standards that are being proposed by independent parties, whether it be A16Z or Creative Commons and whatnot. Should governments step in and build standardization through regulation?
I think so, right? It's not just the governments. There are lots of bodies. When you say government, there are multiple bodies here, right? So we need the judiciary. We need to ensure that there are lawyers who understand how to fight for cases to be able to protect consumers. There are consumer protection bodies. There's a whole host of, there are multiple, and Web3 by nature is cross geography. So big governments like the United States and others, when they set this up, I think and European Union set this up, this becomes standards for the whole world to follow. In my view, there is never a bad time, never a good time. Now is as good as the best time to do it.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for another lightning conversation. I have a feeling we're going to return back to this. The rights space for Web3 is just evolving every single day. And as this land grab that we talked about continues, rights are going to be contested in a different world. But in real life, courts are going to have to make judgments. There is going to be precedent-setting cases, I should say. And I'm sure we're going to come back to this conversation and maybe change our minds about the need for rights, the types of rights that are good for the ecosystem, the types of rights that are harmful. And it'll be fun and fascinating to see how this all develops. So in today's conversation, we talked about several distinct types of rights that projects can adopt for different purposes. We also know that because the space is so new, creators and users are still trying to navigate how all of this comes together and work. In our conversations on a daily basis with potential clients and partners, we are constantly talking about what you're giving away when you're putting intellectual property onto the blockchain, and also what you're gaining if you buy NFTs. NFTs really are introducing a new form of ownership, and for this to succeed, we all think NFT rights are crucial, and we could benefit from more standardization and more transparency. Government stepping in through multiple different ways to hopefully help standardize it, to police it, to regulate it, might in this case be a good thing. And I think that for this type of regulation, I would agree with Suresh because it brings transparency. Rights can,
Thank you,
however, I had to admit it, rights can, however, be divisive. And the Moonbird controversy is still playing out. And Malcolm, I hope you don't mind. We're going to keep coming back to you as a Moonbird's owner over the course of the next coming weeks and months to see whether or not Moonbird's big gamble on CC0 is actually going to play out.
And I hope to see more projects, right? Not just Moonbirds innovating here.
Excellent. And Suresh, you and I will need to step up and get into some of these CC0 communities, which, by the way, I've joined one recently, which I'm still trying to understand better, and I'm sure I'll bring it up in a different podcast soon. This has been Web3 and Whiskey. Please subscribe to this podcast on your favorite audio channel. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button. And also, please subscribe to my weekly Departures newsletter that further explores Web3 innovations and provides explainers for the enterprise world. Join us next week for more Web3 debates and more whiskey, maybe a little bit more regulation. I'm Gary Liu. Thank you for listening. See you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.